Hello everyone! In this lesson, we will learn how to display relationships between posts on the front end of our website. So for an example, here we see the Science of Cats event, and if I click on it and then use the Edit Event button up here towards the top menu bar, you'll remember that we used this new custom field, Related Programs, to create a relationship between the biology program and this current Science of Cats event. So the question is, now that we've saved that relationship value into this field and into the database, how do we actually display that relationship on the front end? Right? So if I go back to the Science of Cats detail screen, how can we output a bit of content down here that reads Related Programs, and then have a link to the biology program? Well, starting right now, let me show you how to do that. So in our text editor, jump into the theme folder, and let's open up the single event PHP file, and let's scroll down to the very bottom. Towards the bottom, we see a div with a class of generic content. So right below that div, let's just drop down, and as a test, we could say hello123. Okay, and there we see hello123. So we know that we are editing the right location of the right file. Let's delete that test. And instead, let's drop into PHP. And the first thing I want us to do is create a new variable. So $sign to create a variable. You could name it whatever you want, unicorn, pizza. The name doesn't matter. But just to make sense, I'm going to name it Related Programs. And let's set this to equal the results of the getField function. Remember, our Advanced Custom Fields plugin gives us access to this function, getField. So now within the argument, we just tell it which field name, which custom field name we want to retrieve. Now, if you can't remember the exact field name of our Related Programs field, let's just go back into the WordPress admin. Let's click on Custom Fields towards the bottom here. Let's click on our Related Program field group. At the moment, this field group only has one field, and in this column, we can see that its name is Related_Programs. So back in our text editor, let's get the field that is named Related_Programs. Okay, so we are saving the value of that field into our variable. And at this point, we might be wondering, what exactly lives within this variable now, right? Is it an object? Is it a string of text? Is it a number? Is it an array? What is it? Well, let me show you a little trick. Maybe down on the next line, if you're ever curious what lives inside a variable or a piece of data, PHP has a built-in function named print_r, and within its parentheses, you can just pass it whatever data you're curious about. So let's type in this variable name. So print_r Related Programs. Okay, let's save that. Go back to the front end of our website. And PHP outputs all sorts of information about that variable. But most importantly, you can see that it begins with the word array. So back in our code, we can delete this print_r line because now we know that this variable, or I guess we should say that what this field returns is an array. And you and I know that an array can contain multiple values. Now in this example, at the moment, we are only going to have one single related program, right? Biology. But just to make the code that we are about to write a bit more understandable, why don't we assign another related program to this event? So back to our website, I'm still on the Science of Cats page. Let's use this Edit Event button up here in the header. And down in our Related Programs custom field, why don't we also say that this event is related to the math program? Okay, so now we're saying that the event is related to two programs. So let me save that, and then use this permalink to go back to the front end. And I forgot to hit save in my text editor, so this is still showing the results of the print_r function. And you'll notice that this output is now twice as big as it was before, because now this contains information about two related programs instead of just one. Okay, so we've got this array that contains information about multiple other posts, So all we need to do now is loop through the array and do something once for each item in it. So right below this line, let's drop down and let's use something called a for each loop. So for each parentheses and then curly brackets. Within the parentheses, we begin with the array that we want to work with. So related programs. And then right after that, you say as, and then you can make up a keyword variable. So let's just say as program. But this could also be pizza, right? The name here definitely does not matter. What does matter is that now within the curly brackets or the body of this for each loop, we can use this program keyword or variable to access each individual related program. So let's give ourselves a goal. Let's imagine that we want to output the title for each related program. Our first instinct might be to run the title function. However, that only works when you're within a main WordPress loop with a WordPress query. And there are WordPress functions like have posts and the posts to get a lot of the data ready for you. So instead, in this case, let's call the function named get the title. And then within these parentheses, we need to either give WordPress the ID, right, the numerical ID of a certain post that we are interested in, or we need to give it a WordPress post object. Well, that's exactly what program is. Each item that lives in our array that this custom field returns is a WordPress post object. So within these parentheses, we can just say program, because that's the keyword that we chose to represent each item that lives in this array. Let's also be sure to echo that out, because functions that begin with get won't handle the echoing for you. Let's also be sure to end this line with a semicolon, and then go ahead and save. And then back on our website, we can see biology and math. Cool, so we have the exact data that we were looking for. Now let's just work on the formatting and design. So instead of just having them side by side, let's output an HTML list item for each one. So let's delete this entire echo line we just wrote. And because I want to write HTML, let's close out of PHP at the end of this line. And then we can enter back into PHP on this line. So that way, on this line, we are free to write HTML. So let's begin with a list item. And then we want to create a link to each program page. So an A element. Inside the link is where we want to output the title. So let's go into PHP and say echo get the title. Just pass it our program variable. And then let's be sure to give our link element an href value. So when someone clicks on the link, let's drop into PHP and echo out the results of get the permalink. So get the permalink for our program item. Cool, let's go ahead and save this, test it out. We see a list, one per row, and if I click on biology, it takes me to that page. Cool. Let's go back to our event page and work on this formatting just a little bit more, right? Let's improve the graphic design. So back in our text editor, we probably want all of our list items to live within an HTML UL or unordered list element. So right before our for each loop, let's just echo out a UL tag. And then right after the for each loop, we can echo out a closing UL tag. And up on the opening UL tag, let's give it a class of link list and min list, just for CSS styling. Cool, so that looks a lot better. But we need to let the visitors of the site know what these are, right? We need a headline that reads related programs. So right above the opening UL line, we can echo out maybe a heading level 2 that reads related programs. And just for styling, let's give the H2 a class of headline and headline -- medium. Okay, and then we probably want a bit of vertical spacing in between the headline and the main content field. So right above the H2, let's just echo out a horizontal rule and give it a class of section break. Perfect. However, I do want to point out that this looks good for an event that does have a related program, but what if we were looking at an event that didn't have any related programs? So for example, if I just pull up the math meetup event, we still see the horizontal rule and the headline, and we even see an error because PHP is not happy about the fact that we are trying to use a for each loop to loop through an array that doesn't even exist or contain any contents. So back in our code, we don't want to run any of this highlighted code unless an event does indeed have at least one related program. So to accomplish that, all we need to do is wrap that code within an if statement. So check this out. Right below the line where we create our related programs variable, let's begin an if statement. And within the parentheses for the condition check, we can literally just type out the name of this variable, related programs. Because if this variable is blank, this will evaluate to false. But as long as the field contains at least one item in it, it will evaluate to true. So then let's just cut and paste all of this code. So cut that into your clipboard and then paste it to live within the if statement's curly brackets. And then if I save that, now things look good on this event that doesn't have a related program. And if I go back to the science of cats, things also look good. Cool. At this point, let's change gears a bit. And if we click on to the biology program page, you could imagine that we would want a section down here that reads upcoming biology events. So basically, when it comes to the relationship between an event and a program, we want it to be a two-way street instead of just a one-way street. We've set the event to be able to point towards the program, but now how do we tell the program to point back to a related event? Displaying the relationship from this direction or this angle is definitely a bit trickier. So for example, if I use this edit program link up here in the menu bar, you'll notice that there's no custom field to relate this program to an event. Now technically we could go into custom fields and create a new field group and field and name it related events, but that would require our users to do double the work, right? And you shouldn't have to set the relationship between two posts more than once. So what should we do? Because right now you might be scratching your head and thinking, this biology program post is not aware of any related events, right? This post is only aware of its own title and its own content. But do you know what's aware of everything? Our database, the WordPress database. And how do we communicate with the database? That's right, through our good old friend, custom queries. So right now, let's jump back into the text editor, and we can close this single event file. And right now, let's jump into singleprogram.php. If we scroll down to the bottom, here we see a div with a class of generic content. And right below that div, you can type out hello 321 or just a bit of sample text. And let me go back to the front end of my website. Cool, so here we can see that hello 321, so we know we are editing the right location of this file. And instead of this dummy text, let's begin to write a custom query. I always begin by asking myself, do I need to write a brand new custom query, or is this similar to something I've already done elsewhere on the website? And if you think about it, our home page is already querying for upcoming events. So we can recycle most of that custom query and then just add on one extra filter that will only return posts that mention a relationship to the current program. I realized that was a lot of rambling and it might have been difficult to understand. So now let's just get into the action and follow along with me. So I'm going to begin by jumping into frontpage.php, and in this template file, the first real block of PHP is a custom query that we've already written, right? This will pull in the two most rapidly approaching upcoming events. So to avoid tons of typing, why don't we just copy this, and not only the query, but let's also even copy the while loop that handles the outputting or displaying of the events. So I'm going to begin by placing my cursor at the start of this PHP block up here, and then let's just select all the way until the end of this while loop down here. So copy that into your clipboard, and then we can close out of the home page. Then back in our single-program file, right underneath this generic div, just go ahead and paste in your clipboard. Okay, so if we save this, this is going to display the two most rapidly approaching events, regardless of which ones are actually related to the current program of biology. So all we need to do to fix things is add on another filter that looks for references to the current program post. And the way we do this is through meta queries. So you might have remembered that we set meta query to equal an array, and then within this top level array, we nested another array. I want you to think of the inner array as a filter, and you can have multiple filters. So right after this first inner array or filter, let's just add a comma, and then drop down to a new line and create another array. So we've got an array inception going on here. Our top level array contains this array and our brand new one. Let me scroll down a bit. So within this new array, let's drop down just to stay organized. And we're going to want a key. And let's just set that to X as a temporary placeholder. And we're going to need a compare. And we're going to need a value. Now let's actually fill in these X placeholders. So the key is the custom field that we are looking in. So instead of X here, let's say related underscore programs. Okay, and we only want events where the value of this custom field is like the numerical ID of the current program post. So instead of trying to hard code a number here, we want this to be dynamic, and we want it to be whatever URL you're currently viewing. So instead of hard coding this to the ID of the biology program, instead of a number here, if we just say get the ID, and that's a function, so include parentheses, then this will be dynamic. So altogether, our new filter is saying if the array of related programs contains, or like, basically means contains, the ID number of the current program post, well, then that's what we're looking for. However, there's only one problem with this code. When WordPress saves this array of related programs into its database, it first has to serialize the data, or serialize the array. So what does that mean? Well, I don't want you to type what I'm about to type, because this is just a quick demo. But let's imagine on one of our events, we said that it was related to 3 programs. So our custom field would be an array that had references to the post ID values of 12, 120, and maybe 1250. Well, WordPress cannot save a true array to a database value. So instead, PHP is going to first serialize this array, which will convert it into something that looks like this. So now that this is not a true array, there's no easy way for us to look in it and say, does the array contain the number 12, for example? Instead, this is just a big, messy string of text. And you could imagine that if the value we were looking for, let's say the current program had an ID of 12, well, if we tried to search this string of text for 12, it would pull in a bunch of false positives. 12 would obviously match, but also 120 would match because it begins with 12. And also, 1200 would match because it begins with 12. However, luckily for us, WordPress wraps each one of these values in quotations. So long story short, when we tell WordPress the value that we are searching for, down here, we don't literally just want to search for 12. We want to search for quotation 12 end quotation. So what we need to do, and this is where you can start typing and following along with me again, is right before we call this function, let's begin with a pair of single quotes, and now we can type a string of text in here, and really all we want to type is a double quote. Okay, and then let's concatenate on the results of our getTheID function, so a period here, and then right after it we want to concatenate on another closing quote. So a period to add on, a single quote so we can type out a string of text, and all we want is a double quote. So let's go ahead and save this. Perfect. Now the only event we see is the one that has a relationship with the biology program. That's going to bring this lesson to a close, but in our next lesson we will pick up right where we left off here and fix the formatting and graphic design of this area. Let's keep it rolling, and I will see you then.